been a very interesting week on the WGA SAG AFTRA strike front. First, we saw the deals for like J.J. Abrams, Minnie Kaling, Greg Berlanti. A lot of the Hollywood elites were paused. They were halted. They were kind of shut down for the time being. For Warner Brothers Discovery, that gave the green light for all the other studios to kind of follow suit. We saw Lorne Michaels and The Rock had their production deals shut down, and this is really starting to affect a lot of people. So some people who were showing solidarity with the strikes, although technically their contracts really aren't covered by these strikes, like they're not in violation if they actually go back to work, are starting to go back to work. Shockingly, now that money is being brought off the table from some of these talents, they're having to go back to work. Not a big surprise. The first person, the big name to do so, was Drew Barrymore. And the strikers are not very happy, even though, by all accounts, by everything that you can go out there and read and research, Drew Barrymore really isn't doing anything wrong. And I must say, personally, I am a Drew Barrymore fan. I remember seeing her as Gertie in E.T. as a little kid. Absolutely fantastic coming-of-age sci-fi movie. Shocking that a director as great as Steven Spielberg could mesh those two things together and make something absolutely beautiful. I remember watching her in Firestarter. Can you have a fall from grace when you're like 12 years old? Apparently, despite being so young, she was going to Hollywood parties and it appeared to ruin her life. That's what it looked like. And, I think she was doing cocaine when she was like 10 or something. There's some really weird stories out there. Drew has been, quite frankly, more honest than I would have been if I had been in those situations. But she had that kind of Drew Barry renaissance where she was back to where she started really regaining her fame with like rom-coms and stuff like that. And people remembered why they liked Drew Barrymore to begin with. And it really felt like she had her life back in order. And it seems like she's genuinely happy. But I imagine she does need the gig. And if she can work and chooses not to, that might mean she's going to lose that gig. Let's hear about all the details regarding Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore has announced on social media that her daytime talk show will begin its new season in accordance with the rules of the SAG AFTRA and Writers Guild of America strikes. The actress first referred to her decision to step down as host of the MTV Film and TV Awards in May in a show of support and solidarity to the striking WGA members. Barrymore's work as a performer on the Drew Barrymore Show is not a violation of current strike rules because the syndicated daytime show is covered by a different SAG AFTRA contract. The contract that covers talk shows, game shows, variety shows, and soap operas was renewed and ratified by union members in 2022. So by all accounts, based on what we have there, Drew Barrymore probably should go back to work. A lot of these studios, they can't move forward with a lot of the projects that they have. They're going to need to fill up airtime. And if you have a contract and you are able to work and you choose not to, in solidarity with the WGA and the SAG AFTRA members, you're likely going to get shit canned. They're going to fire you. They just shut down The Rock. They just shut down Lorne Michaels. They just shut down Chuck Lorre. They just shut down J.J. Abrams. They just shut down Greg Berlanti. These guys are like the upper crust when it comes to Hollywood producers. And while certainly Drew Barrymore is a name that a lot of people know, they probably know better than Greg Berlanti and stuff like that. But that's because she's an on-air talent, and I imagine she's also a producer of her show. A lot of these people end up getting producer credits for their own talk shows and stuff like that. And if she's not violating the rules and she chooses not to work, she's likely not going to get that paycheck. She's going to get fired. That's not a good thing if you're counting on those funds, to pay your rent or whatever. And I understand that people are a little bit confused, but I think it's a lot different when you decide, well, this one-off MTV Movie and TV Awards gig, I will show solidarity for the WGA writers at that point because the SAG AFTRA thing hadn't started, because I want people to know that I'm behind them, but that's not really my livelihood. That's a one-off special appearance for MTV to talk about movies and TV and the award winners and stuff like that. But once you start talking about the Drew Barrymore Show and her not continuing on with her work, even though she can, now you're shitting in your own house, right? And you're not supposed to do that. That's the rules. It's okay to go out there and decline a gig or turn down something you had agreed on in principle when it's a one-off or whatever. But once it really starts to hit you at home, then you got to make the adult decision, which it appears Drew Barrymore is doing. But the strikers are really not having any of it. WGAE stated on social media, the Drew Barrymore Show is a WGA covered struck show that is planning to return without its writers. The Guild has and will continue to picket struck shows that are in production during the strike. Any writing on the Drew Barrymore Show is in violation of WGA strike rules. The Drew Barrymore Show seems to have received more or at least louder criticism online than other daytime talk shows have. However, it is important to note that picketers have also been on the line outside The View, which chose to continue on without its WGA writers in May and returned for its 27th season last week. And while I can understand why SAG AFTRA and the WGA specifically are upset because they did have WGA writers on the Drew Barrymore Show, if they're continuing on the production without the strikers themselves because they're contractually obligated to do so, I just don't think you can hold it against her. But I guess it's easy to go outside of a work and picket because you know you're going to get headlines, right? Like The View obviously is kind of a staple of daytime television. It's been there for so long, but people still know who Drew Barrymore is. She seems like a big deal, and it sounds like, from what I understand, people really enjoy her show. So if you go out there, you pick it there, maybe you get a couple of audience members to wear your WGA strike solidarity pin, and then obviously get them kicked out of the audience, which I guess was a black eye for the show. Although the people behind the show have admitted that Drew Barrymore didn't actually know anything about that. You know, kind of make her look like a bad person while she's trying to pay the bills, take care of herself and her family. I think it's a bit unfair, but I can understand why they would do it. You do want to get the word out there that you're still on strike and people should support you. And we've got Drew Barrymore out there with no writers actually handling a talk show on her own. But I say do your thing, Drew Barrymore. You're doing the best that you can. You're doing the right thing. And if your contract isn't covered by the WGA or the SAG AFTRA contract that is in contention right now, you probably should go back to work, or you're going to get worse than what The Rock and Chuck Lorre and Lorne Michael and Greg Berlanti and Minnie Kaling all got. Their deals are just on hold because they can't work right now. But if you don't start working when you can, or maybe even you should, you're just going to get fired. So I don't blame Drew Barrymore one bit. And this did open the floodgates for a ton of other talent to decide, you know what? I'm going to follow the Drew Barrymore mode. I don't want to get fired. I don't want to be in the headlines as the next person to have their deal shut down. Several daytime talk shows are following the lead of Drew Barrymore in restarting production during dual labor strikes. CBS's panel show The Talk and two syndicated talkers, The Jennifer Hudson Show and Sherry, hosted by Sherry Shepard, are returning to production for season premieres in coming weeks. They'll do so amid labor actions by the Writers Guild of America and SAG AFTRA, which have shut down hundreds of TV and film productions over the past 5 months as the two unions seek better pay and residuals, streaming data transparency, and protections against artificial intelligence, among other issues from studios and streamers. I love it when they lay out all the arguments and why this strike is happening. And it's always the easiest stuff that everyone agrees on. Like, yeah, let's put it into the contracts that you can't replace the writers with AI. Let's put it into the contracts that you actually can't take someone's image and likeness and like their voice or whatever and start making money with it without the compliance of the person with the image and the voice. Like, everybody can agree with that, but they never actually talk about the really contentious stuff, which is what the studios themselves are fighting for. Not that I'm saying the studios are 100% right, but they're certainly not 100% wrong on all of this stuff, and none of it's ever going to get settled until they sit down. And I imagine with all these enormous deals being put on hold, that is what is going to drive actual negotiations in this. It's not going to be the Drew Barrymore Show returning for a third season. It's not the Jennifer Hudson Show. These are just daytime talk show things. You know, it's not game shows. That's not really where they make their money. They're going to start losing episodes of all their big primetime shows, which, you know, outside of sports is where they make their ad revenue. And that's really when the studios will be getting kicked in the balls. And by this point, I imagine everybody's getting tired of this. You're seeing some really big players impacted by this now. And it's probably in everyone, at least involved in this, is best interest to get this solved, because the longer this goes on, the more people are going to realize, like, does it really matter? This is a completely different time than the last time they went into these strikes and all of a sudden everything was reality television or whatever. Every major television studio has a streamer now with like 25, 40 years worth of shows that nobody's ever watched. And customers basically have unlimited access to all this material. And I think they're going to find out whether people like unions or don't like unions. You know, besides new movies not really showing up, and I imagine we'll get foreign movies and stuff like that, I don't see much of a difference. And then everyone's going to lose money in the long run. The studios, the producers, the actors, the writers, everybody. Once the customers figure out, you know, it's not that big a loss. I can just continue on watching stuff I hadn't seen before that was actually produced 10 years ago. It's not that big of a deal to me. And then what happens then? Nobody actually has leverage anywhere. And your ad rates go down. And next thing you know, you can't even make a movie because nobody will lend you the money. That's kind of where they're heading if they don't get their heads out of their asses and stop reminding people that really, in the end, none of them are all that important, unfortunately. And I do think what needs to be remembered about what Drew Barrymore is doing by bringing the show back online, yes, there are 3 or 4 writers in the WGA that are being impacted. Yes, they are on strike, but you have the entire production team that was also not going to be getting paid if she didn't go back to work. Not just Drew Barrymore, the cameramen. We're talking about the assistants, the people that set up the sets, everybody that does all that stuff, the lighting guys, the makeup people. Everybody was going to be left out in the rain if she didn't go back to work, if Jennifer Hudson didn't go back to work, if Sherry Shepard didn't go back to work. And I can understand their point for doing so, because this certainly impacts way more people than just the writers and the actors. It's all the other people behind the scenes that are really getting screwed over in this, because even if the actors and the writers get everything they ever wanted, those people are still getting paid peanuts in comparison to that. And, you know, it sucks for them that all their work is dried up. And I do appreciate what Drew Barrymore is doing. You know, she's got an obligation based on the contract, but she's also got an obligation for the people that work for her, not just the writers and all those people, but there's so many other people being affected. And I think ultimately she's doing the right thing, and she's getting a bad rap. And I think the WGA should probably leave her alone unless she brings in writers for the show. And she says she's not going to do that because she doesn't want to violate the rules of the SAG AFTRA and WGA strikes. And I think she's probably doing the right thing. But I don't think this can't go on forever, right? This can't go on that much longer. If this makes it into 2024, everybody will have made a massive mistake on this one, except for the customers, because most of us have already realized I've got 3 streaming services and I've never watched most of these shows. There's plenty of content that's new to me still out there already. I did talk about all the stuff leading up to this and the first initial wave of shutdowns, major Hollywood elites losing their deals or at least halting them a few days ago. Definitely check this out right here. There's also a link